All right. Hello, my name is Grant Charette, and today I will be presenting on behalf of my team for the Data Science 2010 Final Data Project. Our project name is Predicting Song Performance in Different Countries. So stage one of the data process is the description slash question. So what is the data set that we are using? The data set that we are using is called Spotify Global Streaming Data 2024. And what this data set does practically is it just captures global music trends and it shows statistics from different genres, songs, and how they perform in each country. And the Kaggle link is right here. Here it is. What is the question slash answer that we are trying to find? Well, we are trying to find which music genres thrive the most and the least in different countries. And what we want to attempt to answer at the end of this is, are we able to predict how well a song will perform in different countries given the genre? The benefits of this project include, well, we could show how different music genres perform in different countries. This could create insights for planning world tours, sales, merch sales, etc. And these businesses and such can target the countries that are expected to thrive with this new song. So for stage two, we get our data. So we got our data from a highly respected data set from Kaggle. It was highly rated and all that. How did we clean our data? Well, initially the data seemed mostly clean with only a few minor errors that I had to fix. But there was some issue with it where basically not all countries would show every single statistic, meaning that when I make some of the bar charts that I'll show in a little bit, not all the countries are going to be in every single chart. And I only have the top 15 countries, by the way, and not every single one of them are going to be included because there's just a few gaps in data. And I decided to skip over those gaps rather than to try and predict or guess it or anything like that. How did we prepare our data? Well, we had to organize and sort our data by country, and then we had to rank each genre per country based off of total streams, skip rates, total listeners, and other columns that may serve use to us. And then, do we need to require more related data? Yes. One issue that I realized when doing this project was I knew that there were going to be some very high bias in different countries because if we look at, for example, the United States and we compare it to a smaller country such as Turkey, well, the total amount of streams is obviously going to be much larger in the United States just because there's more people in the United States, right? So I had to get another data set here, which is just a global population index that just shows the total population for each country. And I got the 15 countries from that data set that is resembled in the Spotify data set that we're using. And basically, I used that to create a new column that I called, what was it? Total amount of streams per capita. So that we could kind of see how many streams we're getting based off of like the average person in that country. So for stage three of the data science process, some charts that I made to just start us off. Well, I made a chart here that is the total sum of streams by million for each genre here. The average skip rate by genre and the total hours streamed by genre, right? And this is across all countries or all 15 countries that is shown in this data set. So just some quick insights that we get from this. Well, across all of these countries, classical tends to be fairly safe, right? It has a very high amount of streams. It doesn't have too high of a skip rate typically, and people who listen to it tend to listen to it for a decent amount of time, right? So it's a very safe genre that is listened to across all these countries. Um, Something that was surprising for me at least was to see pop was so low, right? Pop is very skipped compared to all the other countries or all the other genres, I should say, which I guess makes sense because I guess a lot of people just listen to a generic pop song and they want to skip it or whatever. Um, but something that shocked me still was if you look at total streams by millions, pop seems to be fairly low. So I guess it's only maybe an American local thing or whatever that we'd like to base it off of. So a valid hypothesis that we can make is that I thought to myself maybe countries with more classical history, such as like European countries and stuff, would have a higher rates in total hours and all of that of classical music because I feel like that's a stronger part of their culture with like opera, theater, Mozart, things like that. And then aside from that, I would think that most of the other genres tend to kind of oscillate depending on the country and its culture. So here is the streams per capita graphs that I made. Um, what are some things that jump out initially, right? Well, as we can see for just about all of these graphs, Sweden tends to have a very dominant role. And what this tells us is that a lot more people in Sweden have access to Spotify, right? Or they listen to Spotify. Um, Compared to a country such as India down here, well, India has such a high population, and the Spotify users from India does not hold up to the amount of population that it has. That's why it's very very minimal in just about all of these graphs, right? And we can also see the Netherlands tend to something that surprised me was you can see that Sweden tends to be fairly dominant in just about all of these, aside from maybe rock. But then you look at the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is very, very hit or miss, right? They're either very high, such as like R&B or pop, but then they seem to be pretty low for things like hip hop or EDM, things like that. So that was something that kind of stood out to me as well. And then for average skip rate, um, we can see there is definitely a little bit less uh, ver- variance, sorry, in the data here. It all tends to be roughly normal looking distributions. Normal as in like nothing odd to see, not like a bell curve or anything. Um, Nothing tends to really jump out super hard initially, but diving more into the data, well, as we could see prior, the streams per capita is very high, highly uneven. Um, Different genres peak in different countries, right? If we go back, like we can see the Netherlands really loves to listen to rock, or rock performs really well in the Netherlands, but you look at Sweden and you see how Sweden is dominant in all these other categories, and it's just not as much, right? So we can see that difference in genre. Um, and the data shows which countries most of its citizens have access to Spotify in, right? I mentioned that previously. Pop, hip hop, and EDM generally have higher skip rates than classical and rock. Rock skip rates are generally consistent ish. Jazz and K pop show a large variation in skip rates depending on the country. And many countries maintain similar genre rankings like throughout, you know. So some anomalies in the data. Well, of course, Sweden stands out a lot. The same with the Netherlands a little bit, especially for EDM for Sweden or for rock with the Netherlands. And then other than that, some other assumptions that we can make, or things that we saw, was Spain has a large hip hop stream per capita. A lot of people in Spain listen to hip hop music. Mexico has a high rock stream per capita value. Several countries show low values in streams per capita, as a large part of their population does not really use Spotify. Some countries have large skip rates for specific genres. R&B typically has low skip rates, which is nice to see, and classical tends to have a large skip rate. Now, this was something that kind of like stood out to me because although classical may have a little bit of a larger skip rate when compared to others, if we go back here, we can see that the people who listen to classical music tend to usually listen to it all the way through, as we can see that the total hours for classical music is much higher than the rest of the genres. Some issues that we have with the data. Well, some countries are a bit harder to analyze, as a large part of the population does not use Spotify. The data only really shows Spotify users, not users from any other service, any other platform, anything like that. Um, Average skip rate does not explain why those songs were skipped, meaning that we have to make assumptions, which is not a very safe thing to do. Some genres may have fewer songs than others, leading to sensitive outliers, right? Um, and the data is missing for some countries, meaning in some of the graphs I had to exclude like one or two countries each time. Now to model the data, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Google Colab link here. One small limitation that I have with this is the runtime. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the run now so that I'm not just like sitting here for a minute, right? Oh, hold up, I gotta switch accounts. Okay, start that. And then choose files. Choose my data set. Alright, and while that is loading, so to model the data, accuracy measurement, how did I train or test split or use cross validation? Well, I try to use an 80% training and 20% testing split. As it requires a lot of training, as you know, I mentioned with the runtime taking quite a bit. I used five-fold cross validation with the data, and I used mean average error, root mean square error, and r squared values as well to kind of give us some summary statistics on the data. How could I improve my features, such as features engineering or data augmentation? Well, for starters, I could simply add more features, right? I only really analyzed thoroughly the skip rate and the total streams per capita value. So I could simply add more columns, add more data to help us predict more, right? Reduce runtime, right? It takes about a minute to a minute 15 seconds to run the data initially. That's something that I could try and speed up. Balance the data set more, right? As shown before, some of the data was like very highly dominant in certain countries, so I could try and find a way to kind of capture data from each country equally, and to just get data from more countries, right? I only have the top 15 as shown. I could get a whole bunch of countries, right? Every single one of them, if I wanted to. Or I guess not every country has access to Spotify, so that wouldn't really work. Some alternative approaches that I can make. Well, I could use the k nearest neighbor, KNN method. That one would have been a little bit difficult to use, but I guess I suppose like I could have used it for this, like trying to find the closest neighbor to like a certain song and then compare it to like, hey, this song really is similar to this song, therefore we can say that it might perform similarly or something like that. It'd be kind of hard, but I suppose I could do it. Or I could use neural networks, MLP regressor. And then I made a little chart here to kind of, I guess, compare. So this is each model, MAE, RMSE, and R squared. Linear regression, decision tree, random forest, and gradient boosting. These are the different models. And this is which value would be higher, roughly the same, or lower than compared to the method that I used. Oh yeah, and then to go back to the data here, I'll just scroll through the code a little bit. This is the training phase, I suppose. There we go. Summary statistics, we have the R squared value, the mean absolute error, the root mean square error, and R squared. And then go down here. Okay, so enter a country, right? Let's say we wanna see how well a song may perform in Brazil, right? Genre. Let's say R and B. And here we go. Predicted total streams. That's what 7 million about. This is average streams per capita per person in the population, and then the average skip rate is predicted to be around 12.59%. Right. Something that I did forget to do here in the data is to explain what the options are. Right. I forgot to explain, like, for enter a country here, I forgot to write like all the countries that are available or all the genres that are available. But I could easily just go in here and fix that, right? So moving on. To communicate the data, well, what did we add? Well, there were, at the time, there were several studies over how well a certain aspect of music can perform in different countries, such as like danceability or like tempo or something like that. But it was actually surprisingly hard to find like a model that would predict how well a song could perform based off of the genre and based off of the country that it's in. That was a little bit difficult. I did see like similarly, I saw like like a model that was predicting how well a movie might perform based off of genre. So I guess I could have used like I suppose we could have used like similar machine learning methods as that data set did there. Um, and then for prescriptive analysis, well, now, like looking back after all of this, I'm able to understand how other countries, and their, like how other countries' culture revolves around certain music genres, right? How certain music genres perform. There were some surprising things I saw in there. Uh, and I'm now also to understand how some countries simply may not have as strong of an access to Spotify as other countries, right? That was something that surprised me, was seeing, if I go all the way back to the graphs here, seeing the United States was fairly low in every single one of these. That was actually pretty surprising to me, how little people tend to use Spotify when compared to like Sweden or the Netherlands, for example. Um, but I suppose a reason for that may just be there's less music listeners than I thought, or there's a lot of other big streaming services that is pretty popular in America, such as like Apple Music or YouTube Music. I mean, those are headquartered in America, but those are just assumptions, right? I don't know for sure. Um, where was I? Yeah, yeah, and then now, how can this help the world, right? Like, how can companies and artists and producing companies use the model that I made to, how would it help them, right? Well, it can possibly predict how much revenue or how much popular or how how popular a song may be in certain countries. So they could plan merch sales for supply, or world tours, right? If they realize that, hey, maybe there's less total streams in Sweden for hip hop, but hey, so many people in Sweden tend to listen to hip hop when compared to the population of Sweden. So maybe a hip hop concert may actually perform very well compared to what we may have thought. Um, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you. This was fun to do. I learned a lot throughout this project, and that was about it.